Welcome to the Campus Ministry Today podcast. This is for campus-based and church-based collegiate workers all over the world. We're trying to inspire and equip you to fulfill the Great Commission. And so we have a special treat today, a special session that my co-host Paul Worcester is going to tell us about. Paul, go for it, bro.
Yeah, my buddy Clayton Bullion and I, we started Campus Multiplication Network together. We actually did a workshop called Multiplying Your Ministry, where we basically give inspiration, the why, and then we talk about the how of planting new collegiate ministries across the world. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing your feedback on this, and I'm excited about it. So Shad, could you pray and just pray that as we step in, our listeners listen to this, that they would be inspired and encouraged?
Of course, let's pray. God, this is an amazing session with Paul and Clayton as they share with other campus workers what it means to start and launch and grow a campus ministry. And Father, so many people that are watching or listening today that they're at that same juncture, or they want to be, or they need to be thinking about starting new campus ministries. There's thousands upon thousands of campuses across the world that have no Christian witness. Lord, I pray that current campuses wouldn't have 10 or 20 ministries when there are campuses that have no ministry and no gospel witness. And so, Lord, touch the hearts of the people that are listening and watching to this recording right now, that you would work in them and through them to multiply EDM campus ministries and EDM collegiate churches all over the world. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
So there's so many good biblical reasons to do college ministry, and we don't have time to list off the 120 of them that there are. But my goal is to get your gears turning. And when God called me to Chico State, a small state school, a small college town, and an average-sized state school, about 16,000 students, there was two people that God put on my heart. One actually is obvious, is the Chico State student. But the other one is maybe not as obvious. The person that God put on my heart was a person, the average person in an unreached people group. The average person in an unreached people group. And because the average person in an unreached people group will live and die and never hear the gospel of Christ. And so I think a life of sin, emptiness, eternal suffering, that is the average person in the unreached people group. That's where they're headed. And this quote by David Platt, I just love. He says, "When will the concept of unreached people become intolerable to the church? What will it take to stir our hearts and lives for men and women whose souls are plunging into damnation without ever hearing of salvation? This cannot be conceivable for those who confess the gospel. For if this gospel is true, and if our God is worthy of praise from all people, then we must spend our lives and mobilize our churches for the spread of Christ's love to the unreached people groups around the world. Jesus has not given us a commission to consider, but a command to obey." I love that. But I've just always, ever since I took the Perspectives course, and I've just had this burden for those that in unreached people groups that will live and die and never hear the gospel, and they're headed straight to hell. And I want to use my life for what is most strategic for them. And through studying and thinking through and kind of talking through, I believe the most strategic thing I can do to reach them there is to start movements of God on college campuses here and mobilize them there. And so Clayton has a similar story. He was all about missions. He's going to share some of his story on that. But at the end of the day, I love this quote by Ralph Winter. "Anyone that can help 100 missionaries to the field is more important than one missionary on the field." I'm praying for another student volunteer movement. Back in the day, there was this amazing, I encourage you, if you don't know about it, Google it, look it up. There's some great videos and books on that. And there's a great book called In This Generation by Todd Aaron. I encourage you, if you want to learn more about the student volunteer movement. But at the end of the day, we need another student volunteer movement. We have actually, in America, as unreached as our campuses are, there's places where they're much more unreached, and we still have a wealth of resources that we have an obligation to go and to send to those that will never hear about Christ. And so it's not gonna. But the thing I'm very convicted about is it's not just sending that we have to do. It's the kind of sending that we do. So I'm a big fan of the Go-To movement. And you guys are familiar with that. It's basically challenging students to give 2 years of their lives to a strategic missions effort. But something I'm a little concerned about is if they aren't laborers, if they're not sharing the gospel on our campuses while they're with us, if they've never or hardly ever shared the gospel where they've been 4 years in the easiest place in the world to share the gospel, which is the college campus, what makes us think they're going to go do that somewhere else? So if our sending is just helping, sending people to go be ineffective somewhere else, then we need to rethink our inks on that, and we need to think through this. And so it's only going to happen with the kind of evangelism and disciple making that really multiplies and sees a movement of God on your campus. There's a certain type of evangelism and disciple making that fosters movement. And there's a certain type that squelches it. And so my heart is EDM, not the music, okay? Evangelism, disciple making, and mission mobilization. And mission mobilization is key. Thinking not only multiplying your ministry to new campuses in the States, but also if your vision is not for the whole world, it's too small. If your vision is not for the entire planet, it is far too small. I love this quote. She said, "The fact is, no one thought up the strategy of fulfilling the Great Commission by reaching the college campus. Campus ministry is the result of the observation that God has chosen to use the university and college students as its primary vehicle in accelerating the evangelization of the world. To be involved in campus ministry is to be involved in God's primary mission strategy." So one of my life goals is I actually have a specific number of people that I want to mobilize to the unreached. I'm not going to tell you what it is because that's between me and God. But I pray for it every day, that God would use my life, whatever that means, to mobilize as many people as possible to go to those unreached people groups. So there's actually workshops about mission mobilization at this summit. I encourage you to check those out if you want to learn more about that. But the other person I had on my mind is the average Chico State student. Okay, that's obvious. When I moved to Chico State, the campus is about 3% reached with the gospel. So teetering on an unreached people group, our unreached people groups are about 2%, according to missiologists. And so it's also true that the average Chico State student will go through their entire college experience and never meet a Christian and never hear the gospel. Max Barnett, one of my mentors, and another guy I really respect, the state director in California, Neil Walker, they cast vision. There's 280 college campuses in California, and there's 10 Baptist-sponsored ministries on those campuses. And even the campuses with other good ministries like Cru, etc., most campuses are 2 to 3% reached. And so it's honestly in California and the Northwest and the Northeast especially, that they're actually less reached than a lot of places overseas. Like I could take you to Nairobi, and there is a ton of Christians on the University of Nairobi. But this reality should break our heart. And there's a great book I encourage you to read. I recommend is Gaining by Losing by J.D. Greear. It's about church planning, but we can just substitute collegiate ministry starting. Just read that book. And in it, he tells a story of a missionary that got offered. He was in an unreached people group. He got offered a job for this megachurch, and the missionary said, "I'll turn down where I'm needed to stay where I'm irreplaceable. I'll turn down where I'm needed to stay where I'm irreplaceable." And one question that Clayton and I always get tired of hearing is, when are you gonna get your own church? When are you going to become a real pastor? And my snarky response is, when I think that's more strategic than being a college ministry leader, okay? then I'll be a pastor. But because I believe the college campus is the best place in the world to reach lost people and train people and send people. It is just God sovereignly caused the college campus to exist for the advancement of His glory and His kingdom. So I'm never going to grow out of collegiate ministry unless I hear audible voice from the Lord, okay? So here's a thought. I want to challenge you guys. I want to flip the kind of that quote from Gaining by Losing is some of us need to think about going. Maybe to a new campus in California, maybe overseas to an unreached people group, maybe even use this phrase to challenge your students to think bigger about their life purpose. Why stay where you're needed when you can go where you're irreplaceable? And I'm just choking up because I think about Cody and Brittany. They're our associate directors. They were the first students that we reached 12 years ago at Chico State. And they said that exact quote to me when God called them to go to UC Santa Cruz, which is about 30,000 students. And it's actually 1% reached with the gospel on that campus. And they are so needed on our campus. Like, they run the show in our ministry. Our ministry is pretty big, and we have lots of students, and they were just like, they've been carrying the weight of this ministry forever. But it was one of the most proudest moments in my life in ministry to hear them say that, to articulate that reality is, sure, we're needed here, but it felt like ripping out a chunk of our ministry, just, it hurt so bad. But we're sending a team of 4 staff to start a ministry at UC Santa Cruz. And I couldn't be more thrilled when after I get over the pain of losing my best friend, that's moving away. They were our first students we reached on the campus. So maybe God is calling you or someone here to take a risk, raise support, and go to a campus in California. Support raising is okay. You can do it. Okay? I think it's actually a blessing. One of the reasons I hesitated about this NAM job is it's not support raising, because I love support raising. And so Northwest, Northeast, I encourage you to consider going to the Northwest, go to the Northeast, go to the Forgotten 50 in Canada. Go somewhere where no one else is. And this is a passage that came to my mind as I was preparing. Jesus said, Look, I tell you, lift up your eyes and see the fields. They are white for harvest. So it's interesting, in the context, Jesus is talking about Samaritans that were heading to him. And so the Samaritans were not Jesus's, and at the time, they were not the target audience of their group. But Jesus said, look at the fields, they're white. So Jesus always wanted to expand the vision. He always wanted to expand the kingdom. So I wanted to discuss this. Let's take another 3 minutes, and let's discuss this question. What campuses in your area have little to no ministry? And what about your region? If you were going to send a team of staff to start a new ministry, where would you send them? So let's take a few minutes, 3 minutes, turn around to some people, 2 or 3, and let's discuss that. And then Clayton and I need to touch base on I'm going a little long, so. All right, let's get it back together. All these questions are designed not to be exhaustive. It's just to get you thinking, okay? So here's a thought I had. If you struggled with that question, your vision is too small. If you struggle with that question, you need to have a list of campuses that you're praying for, that you're looking for, because the gospel of Jesus always advances to a new place. And God's called us to reach the whole world for him. And so let's think strategically. On our campus, we have a PDF, actually it's a Google document, of our top 20 list of campuses that by the grace of God, we're going to go plant on in California. And so we have a list, and we geek out about all the demographics and all sorts of stuff, what ministries are on, what percentages it reach. And our students know about it. They're talking about it. We have sophomores that are already planning to go to UC Irvine. And we're like they come up to me, hey, what do you think about UC Irvine? I'm like, well, let's talk about it. And we nerd out about all the stats and the demographics and all that. And so we want to reach unreached campuses that are not very reached, but we also want to reach strategic sending campuses And Steve Chatterak has a whole rubric for that he talks about. And we're actually doing a luncheon about multiplying ministries that we're going to do a panel discussion. So if you want more info on that, come to that lunch tomorrow for multiplying ministries. But here's a thing that is pretty interesting. There's more than 2,000 campuses. It's probably more like 2,300 campuses across the United States without a gospel community. Nothing. So we've got to go there first. So I want to challenge you, make a top 5 list, or if you want, make a top 20 list, or, dream big. You can't outdream God. And here's something I'm praying for, as actually God's giving me opportunities across the nation. I pray that ministries that are from more reached regions will adopt less reached regions for their planting vision. So open your eyes and look at the fields. They're ripe for harvest, okay? And expand your vision. It's too small a thing to just reach this one place. Look, expand it. Even in Mark 1, Jesus had the whole town of Capernaum, and he could have started his mega church, his podcast, his book writing ministry, his conference speaking ministry. But in the early morning, it was the only time he could get away. While it was still dark, he went out to pray. And then Peter came to him, and Peter was looking for him. He's like, everyone is looking for you. Do you ever feel like that? Like in ministry? Like everyone is looking for you. And Jesus, he said this statement, he says, I have to go to these other towns also, for that is why I've come. That's why I've come. And so Jesus said, I must go to these other towns also. That is why I've come. And the college campuses across our nation, even you think about the Bay Area in California, I think about that is the least church city in America is the San Francisco Bay Area. It's about 40% reached. Think about that. That's actually pretty good. 40% churched. But the college campus, San Jose State, that's right there. There's mega churches. I have a friend that leads a mega church of 3,000 across the street. There's 20,000 students at San Jose State, and there's hardly any ministry happening. So I have some theories on that, why that's the case. I wrote an article, 5 reasons churches don't reach college students. But man, it's on us to, who's going to go to San Jose State? We need someone. And so Clayton has a great story of his ministry moving from a reached area and mobilizing to an unreached area. So let's give it up for Clayton. There you go.
This is the moment where we kind of need a strategic, transitory prayer. Okay, so while we said that, I'm going to flip through, because one of the cool things, you guys have all taught before, and you know that if the worship guy goes long, it doesn't matter, because it's your fault the service went over. And
sorry, guys.
Paul was super, super gracious, was like, dude, I can cut some stuff out. So watch. We're going to share this with you later, but just in case if you wanted to know what Paul's about to say, he was going to say that, and 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 that. Oh, we're still not there. Keep going. There we go.
Okay. Chill. I'm sorry.
For kind of like Paul, I ended up at a small college town in Texas, different than Chico because it's in Texas. And those of you that have been to Texas and been to California know that, well, it's just different. It's not bad, it's just different. But very similar. Small, 10,000 students. It was the poor man's party school. And I kind of went there on accident, to be really honest. I wanted to do missions, and that seemed like a good spot to do that until I could get back over to the Middle East. And then I came to this conference 6 years ago and met Ken Harmon, and Ken Harmon directs NCM, Northwest Collegiate Ministry. Said, hey, you've got some students coming on summer missions. You just come up. I'll host you. Figure it out. We had someone who had free airplane tickets. Rental car was covered, and it's just too good to be true. So we pawned off our 3 kids at that point, on the interns, and said, here, take care of them. Also clean out the shed. I'm leading a breakout session tomorrow about what to do with your interns. Don't do that. But lessons learned. And so we went to Northwest, and so over 5 days, I basically walked campus after campus. I think we hit 12 campuses in 6 days. And many of them, there was zero gospel presence. Now, some of them had gospel presence, but there was a lot of them that was just very, very, very lost. And I remember sitting off the green space at Portland State at Park Avenue Coffee and just weeping, just kind of ugly crying. The homeless were walking by trying to figure out what's wrong with this white guy, and I'm just trying to articulate. I'd never been on places where I always thought every campus was like my campus. I thought every campus minister had to wrestle with 15 other campus ministries for the freshman class. And this was the first time that I really realized that there were campuses that had very little gospel presence. They were hard rows to hoe, difficult fields. And so came back wrestling with, do I move to the Northwest? Do we send students? What does that look like? And just to kind of make this kind of quick, in 2015, we looked across the street and realized there was a community college there that had no gospel presence. And I don't know, I drove by it all the time, but I was like, man, I'm not going to diversify our ministry. I've got 10,000 college students here. I'm not going to sacrifice so that these guys can hear the gospel. I told my boss, I said, if you ever tell me to do ministry on the campus, I'm quitting. I'm not going to split. I'm not going to do this double thing. But we sent our 22-year-old intern, campus missionary intern, to start that work. And we fell in love with this idea of students hearing the gospel for the first time, being the only gospel presence, being one of the first gospel presence. Because it's something like when you walk into a dark place and you turn a light on, it doesn't have to be a bright light, it just has to be a light. And just, you guys know it, you've done that at night. Turn the light on and the moths come to it, and on our campuses we've got moths and we've got cockroaches. Turn the light on, the moths come to the light, the cockroaches run from it. And it's just stamping on campus and turning a light on, just saw students come to know Christ that would have never heard the gospel otherwise. So it kind of led us on this journey of planting campuses. And so here we are in 2021. We've gone from being, in 2015, being one campus to 2021 being 17 campuses. This is our crowd in 2021. There's going to be 5 campus ministries planted in 2 different states. The thing I want to tell you about this, just real quickly, kind of like Paul's story, these are some of the first students in our ministry. It's like sending your best friends, sending your kids away, because those campuses need it more than I need a bigger staff. The cool thing about this is that this year Tarleton State is not planting any campuses, but our second generation campuses. So we're having 5 grandkids this year, okay? And we're seeing the Lord do some really amazing things. And Meg Craig, who you'll meet Meg Craig, she's leading a breakout here in a little bit. She's rap, loud, bubbly. If you've got small girls in your house, she's like the Pinkie Pie of My Little Pony. No, Austin's the only one that's like, oh, I've got that one. But Meg lands in San Antonio, and over the course of this past year, they've gone from having 1 gospel presence on 1 campus to gospel presence on 5 campuses. And Meg is I'm going to tell you this, Meg is the oldest campus planner we've sent out. And we sent her out and she turned 28. Most of these were planted by 23, 24, 25-year-olds. I just recently stepped out of Tarleton and transitioned to a different role in the state, and I handed off our ministry to a 25-year-old. You're never too young to plant a campus. You don't have to know everything to plant a campus. You don't have to know everything to do campus ministry.
That's right.
If you don't believe that, look to the person next to you. Okay? But this is what God did, and this kind of leads me to this question. Would you rather your ministry be a small tree with lots of fruit or a big tree with little fruit? Now, of course, we all know the answer to that. We want to be a big tree with lots of fruit, right? But if you're a small tree, you're like, well, we've got good fruit. Those mega ministries, they don't have nothing. And if you're a big ministry, it's like, well, we've got good things going on. But guys, can I tell you something? One tree, whether it's big or small, doesn't make a lot of difference. It only casts so much shade. It can only produce so much fruit. But have you ever walked up to an orange grove or orchard? Orchards change the landscape. There's certain seasons when you walk by like the citrus trees and everything smells clean. Maybe it's because I use lemon Clorox bleach, but it just smells, it changes the way things smell, it changes the way things look. And guys, I'm going to tell you, if we're in order to impact this generation, we're going to have to start thinking in terms of orchards and not trees. It's not just enough that I'm going to grow my ministry to every part of my campus, but how do I multiply? I mean, that's how we judge maturity, right? How do you know your kid is physically mature? It's when they're able to reproduce. And as a parent, when you hit that stage, your prayer life gets better because you're stressed out about your kid. But I think as a ministry, one of the ways, how do we know that we're becoming mature ministries is our ability to reproduce. Reproduce on the smallest level and reproduce on the biggest level. How am I producing disciples, multiplying disciples in generations? How am I multiplying small groups? How am I multiplying my ministry? One of our prayers for our ministry is that we be a ministry that sees 4 generations on campus, just like 2 Timothy 2:2. So by the time someone becomes a senior, they can look and say, the person I led to Christ, led a person to Christ, led a person to Christ, and I've got 4 generations. But not just see 4 generations on campus, but be 4 generations of campuses. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited because we're seeing our 3rd generation, and like I'm ready for my great grandkid. We haven't got to that yet, but someone told me we could never. Said that's just not possible in campus ministry, and I have their phone number, and we're gonna have a conversation in a couple of years. I'm super excited. So what I want to really do, that's our story, and so what a lot of this we paid the dumb tax, guys. This wasn't this. The Tarleton story isn't because I had landed there and had a strategy and we thought through some really cool things and we implemented it worked. It was mostly just the dumb tax. Okay? It was like, oops, this just happened. All right, what do we do? And even getting ready for this conversation, I was texting all of we've got a big group text for the Tarleton Network team. I was like, hey guys, what did we do? Help me out here. And so a lot of this is distilled from our students talking this through and say, hey, this is what I saw, this will help me. So this is where we're headed. Okay, how do we recruit people to plant? How do we train and assess them? And how do we share and care for them? Okay, so how do we recruit people to plant? Habakkuk 2:2. Write down the vision and make it plain on tablets so that one may run with it. It's this picture of what is the vision, make it easy enough for a messenger, because back in the day, their paper was called rock, and they could carry it long distances. And if your vision is not it can't go viral, then you need to change your vision. Okay? Not make it simple, not dumb it down or make it smaller, but articulate it better. If your students can't make fun of you casting vision for multiplication, then you aren't casting vision for multiplication enough. Okay? So the moment you walk in and one of your students is like, well, Austin always says, and there's like, yes, someone's finally getting it. They're making fun of me. Some of you, they make fun of you, and that's not because of the vision. We can't help with that. That's another story. But guys, one of the things, Paul just talked a little bit about how strategic the college campus is. Your college students don't know how strategic they are. You need to tell them. Tell them they're the most moldable, sendable, trainable demographic on the planet. Tell them over and over that this is the only time in their life that they are going to have immediate access to 20 to 30,000 of their closest friends in 12 square miles. They're never going to have more free time than they are now. They're never going to be more available. That the foundation they lay now is the building that they build. The pace they set in their 20s is the race you run in your 30s. Tell them over and over, these are the years. This is the place that we got. Every revolution in the U.S. and the world and history that we know of basically started from this demographic. You're the generation that changes the world. So are you going to change the world? Or are you going to pass this on to somebody else and say, no, not us, we're good? Tell them over and over and over. Do you like your job? Do you look like you like your job? Because if you're casting vision of like, give your life to college ministry, and they look at you and you look miserable, guess what? It ain't going to work. Love your job and let your students see you loving your job. Tell them how much fun it is. They don't BS them. Because we all know some things are hard. We just went through that year. It's called COVID. Remember that? But find ways to enjoy your job. Stand up and announce a goal. Guys, in 2015, I stood up in front of our group and said, hey guys, we've adopted the Northwest. And no one's ever, we've never heard of a campus ministry doing that. We said, hey, the Northwest is ours. There's 95 campuses in the Northwest. They're all Tarleton's. Okay, we're just going to baptize them in Tarleton purple. We're going to call it good. And we are praying that the Lord would send us, as many who say yes, to the Northwest. So we're talking about planning on all these campuses. So here's the deal. And it was just like this. I said, so here's the deal, guys. Who are the people that we're sending? You. So my prayer is after you graduate, you give up your little dreams and you move to the Northwest. If you're a doctor, that's great. I want you to change that dream. And it just basically said, this is what I'm telling you. And you know what our seniors did? They rolled their eyes. You know what our freshmen did? They got up and moved to the Northwest. This past year, we sent 6 of them to the Northwest on 2 different campuses. A couple of those campuses that are being planted next year, planted by the freshmen that were sitting in that room in 2015.
Amen.
So your upperclassmen may roll their eyes, but your freshmen are listening. The average student has no idea what it'd look like to give their life to campus ministry. Let's face it, unless you're a campus minister's kid, you have no idea. You had no idea what campus ministry looked like. What happened? You got to college, it impacted you, and you thought, dang, this is better than getting a real job. And you jumped into it, right? The average student has no idea that they can do this. So invite them into it. Now, this isn't like a high-pressure sales talk, like, hey, listen, if you really love me, and this is what honor God. Half of our graduates at Tarleton this year, half of them went into at least giving a year back. They're giving a year and praying about a lifetime in college ministry. But there are several of our graduates that aren't. And we didn't even ask them to. One of them is going to be a park ranger, and we've known that, and she extended her graduation day so that she could go back and give another year on campus and take half the classes so that she could train the person underneath her. And we're like, hey, we know that God's called you to be a park ranger. We're excited about that. We're going to commission you and send you as a missionary. The guy that's headed to med school, we're commissioning and sending him as a missionary. And it's not like, we have our favorites that go into college ministry and then the JV team that goes to the marketplace. But we send out that invitation and invite them and call them to something greater. Okay. Also, you want to expose them. So Hunter's at University of Texas, El Paso. I don't know if you know much about El Paso, but it's closer to San Diego than it is to basically the rest of Texas. It's in a different time zone. Okay? The average UTEP student has no idea what ministry looks like on any other campus. The average UTEP student has no idea what the rest of Texas looks like. Your student has no idea what the other campuses look like. Like, Paul and I do ministry very, very similar, but if you were to drop a Chico State student at Tarleton, it would blow their mind. And vice versa. So if you want your students to gain a heart and a vision for other campuses, you need to expose them to other campuses. When we started sending students to the Northwest, it blew their minds that you had to give a permit to go hang a hammock on a tree because it might hurt the tree. When students from the Northwest became to come to Tarleton, they'd never seen more than 200 students in a room together that loved Jesus. It blew their mind. Find ways to pray for other campuses. Everycampus.com, Collegiate Day of Prayer. These are great, great, great tools.
You guys use spring break for those vision trips, right? That's kind of one of the
We do some weekend stuff. We find some ways to get some people on some other campuses. So if you find yourself like road tripping to wherever, and you see that sign that says, blah, 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 community college, pull in, prayer drive campus. If you're headed to a mission trip and it's like, man, we're fixing to pass through wherever, and there's a college campus there, stop and pray that campus. Do you look up and are you in a metro area and do you know if every campus in your area has been prayed for? Dude, gather the troops on Saturday and say, hey, we're going to pray walk every single campus in this city. So in our little map down here, those 4 campuses in San Antonio, we took a weekend, we slept on a concrete floor in Baptist Temple Tabernacle Church in San Antonio. And there are 13 campuses, 113,000 students. And we took a team of 20 and we prayer walked all 13 of them in a day. And you better believe when we said, hey, who do you think God's calling to San Antonio? Several of our staff and students went, me. I'm going, and I want to go to this campus. Find ways to expose them. Does every college in your athletic conference have work on it? So it was like the battle of the Baptists and the Jesuits in the NCAA finals, Baylor versus Gonzaga. Baylor has 26 campus ministries on it. Gonzaga has 3. Does every campus in your conference have a gospel presence? Does every team you play in basketball have a gospel presence? In your region, in your city? Maybe one of the best things you can do at Collegiate Summit is find the guy from the Northeast, or find the guy from New York City, or find the guy from the Northwest and say, hey, tell me more about your region. Let me walk some of these campuses. Guys, there's simply no simple substitution for exposure. Because if you get students on that campus, they begin to feel like it's their campus. I'm not against doing humanitarian mission trips and going and building houses and doing those things. Those are all really good. But I would encourage you to find some time when things open back up in COVID-friendly and safe ways. This is being recorded. To spend a mission trip on another campus doing college ministry. Find a way to do it. Because what happens if you create a cycle, so we've got several campuses in the Northwest that are ours. We just kind of claimed them, they're ours. And we've sent teams to them. So right now at Oregon State, Lynn Benton, Lane Community College, University of Oregon, like we've got students, former students there, and they're working together. But we send students 3 or 4 times a year. Every break, we've got a team headed there. And so those students, when they moved to that campus to start those ministries, they didn't feel like they were moving to a different campus. They felt like they were moving to their campus. They already had friends there. They knew the churches there. Find some ways to do some work. Okay, so how do we recruit? How do we train and assess them? So I came back and said, hey, we're all headed to Northwest. Who's in? I had one super senior that was like, I think that's a great idea. That's better than, going back and working for my dad. And we were super excited, like, yeah, first fruits. And we're like, yes, you can go. And so within 3 months, we had him on a campus in Oregon. Right now, he's a openly practicing homosexual, transgender advocate, totally went off the deep end. We did not train him. We did not assess well. And it took us a while to recover from that, emotionally, but also just, we celebrated him so much, and it burned bridges with our churches, it burned bridges with because we didn't do a good job on our side making sure he was ready spiritually and emotionally. And so there's no substitute for assessing your staff and your students. There are tons of ways to do this, way oversimplified. The 4 C's of assessment are super helpful. Character, do I trust them? Calling, do they feel called to this? Is there a sense of, man, I've really heard from the Lord, and we're in agreement of this, and this is what they're doing, this isn't what the cool kids are doing? Chemistry, do I like them? Can I work well with them? If I'm putting together a team, will everybody work well with them? Or am I mixing all nitro and glycerin and fixing to ship it off and just see what happens? Competency, can they do it? Can they do it? And here's the deal. You guys, you're in college ministry, and so sometimes you get drunk on potential. It's like, oh, they're going to be so great. There's so much potential in this freshman class. Nothing would get a coach fired in NCAA football more than potential. Because they had everything they needed and they didn't deliver. You cannot send people based on their potential. You have to send them based on their competency, on demonstrated ability to do it. So, train them. Our teams, we commissioned some teams that had the Northwest, and the first time they kind of went to spy out the land, like the Numbers 13 kind, and they came back and said with big deals of grapes and stuff, they came back with pot brownies and other stuff. I'm just kidding. It was Oregon. hemp bracelets and PETA signs. But but they came back and said, hey, we love this and we know we're called to this. We don't know how to do this. Help us figure this out. And I said, yeah, of course, we will help you. In the back of my mind going, how are we going to help you? But we cast that vision so strong and confident we could do it. But this pointed out something in me. Sometimes as leaders, we're really good at helping our staff become good cogs on our ministry wheel, as opposed to training them to see and learn the big picture. Sometimes I'm really good at training interns and associate directors to be interns and associate directors. But the problem is if I train interns and associate directors, they're never going to feel like they can do ministry on their own. I need to train interns to be directors. I need to train associate directors to be directors. I need to train freshmen to be directors. Instead of, hey, I need you guys to run my events. So you train them. Give them places that they can practice these things. You may say, well, I don't have a campus they can go test drive one day a week. But you've got a dorm. You've got an affinity group. What does it look like in the context of a team to say, hey, I need you to go figure out how to reach Bender Hall? Well, I don't know how to do that. Well, first thing, let's pray for a person of peace. Let's have this conversation. Give them a place to practice these things. Because here's the deal. If a student can gather a group of students, teach them how to love each other and pray and apply scripture to their lives, and pass it on, they can start a campus ministry. Dave Ferguson says that if you can lead a small group, you can plant a church. And so how do you put your staff and your students in a place where they have to pioneer something on that level? And there's a difference between leading a small group and starting a small group. What we're really good at ministry sometimes is saying, hey, we're going to have a small group rally, y'all come. And then you get all the sheep together, and then you start appointing shepherds. Okay, you take these 10, you do the freshmen, you do the music majors, because we got lots of those, instead of train shepherds and tell them to go find sheep. Train them, give them a place to practice. Okay? So if we do those things, so we expose them, we train, assess them, all right, how do we send them and care for them? All right, whether you're a campus-based or church-based college ministry, involving the local church in the sending process is critical. Because as a college ministry, you have a very short memory and very shallow pockets. How many of you have been on your campus longer than, 6 years? Yeah. Have you ever made the mistake of mentioning someone and be like, hey, yeah, I remember so-and-so, they were awesome, and that crowd go, who? Right? Or our friends who are pastors, they mentioned somebody who had been gone 60 years, and the church is like, oh, they're our best friends, we love them to death, yeah. Why? Because the church has a memory. We're like the little ADHD, kindergartner that forgets every 4 years. Also, if you gather your entire ministry together and say, hey, everybody, let's give 10%, you're going to get 30 cents, a Whopper wrapper, and a leftover flip-flop. And so involving the local church. And if you're a church-based college ministry, you can, something went wrong. But if you're a church-based college ministry, you can have the tendency to claim, I'm part of the local church, but you behave like a parachurch ministry, and you never integrate your ministry into the whole of the church. So you can't send based on your church-based college, but you need to use the whole church. Get some old wisdom involved. Get some young energy involved. You need the counsel and the wisdom of the local church. One of the things we realized this very early, so we created a partnership. So all the teams that we sent out, whether it was San Antonio, whether it was Fort Worth, whether it was Oregon, and there's going to be a spot where you're going to get our entire document. You can find it. Basically, this just says, hey, during the assessment stage, this is our role as a ministry. This is your role as the local church. Candidates, this is your role. And around each one of our candidates, we develop a launch team. And on that launch team is a church staff member, a BSM staff person, a couple from the church, maybe it's somebody they know or some Sunday school teacher, but some adults in there, all right, some gray hair in there, and then the candidates. And they begin to walk through this assessment process, the sending process, the caring process. Because what you need when you send people is you need someone in the local church who's going to be the John the Baptist, that's going to say, this is the person. we love this person, pay attention to this person, you need a local champion. And oftentimes the pastor's just not it. And that's not a bad thing. Just your pastor's got a lot more going on than just the college students they're sending out. So find that person who's going to remind and bang the drum in the local church, like, hey, we need to pray for so-and-so. Hey, so-and-so's coming back. Can we have them have some stage time? And so we try to define these things out with our churches. So the sending process. We define the sending process. We define how we care for them. Interesting things. So the Johnsons are here. They moved to Oregon last year. Their local church, we went through this process with them with Valley Grove. Valley Grove has been up to see them twice already. They went up in the fall to do like a pastoral care, like how are you doing? How can we love you? They're going up in 2 weeks to run the food and the hospitality for their staff meeting, their staff retreat. Their church cares for them a lot better than I ever could as a BSM director. Because I can't cook. I'm not sweet. I hug them and they're like, ugh. But like the little old ladies that hug them from their church, like, oh, we love you, Miss Debbie. Find involvement. Never out of sight, never out of mind. Guys, some of you guys are phenomenal pastoral care. Your students love you. They're super excited to be around you. You keep up with your alumni really well. Some of you don't. But one of the things you cannot afford to do is you cannot afford to send them and then leave them. Fathers and mothers in the room, you would not birth a baby and then leave the baby. So if you birth a college ministry, you better be around, especially that first year. Keep in regular, meaningful, consistent contact. When we, like the second or third one that we planted, and it was really the first true plant, not just like kind of a satellite connection with, it was like, here you go, you're on your own. I made a database of everybody who's in our network in the weeks, so 1 through 16, and I would make sure I had contact with them every week. So I'm checking all right, who have I not talked to this week? Well, one of them came back and said, man, I just feel like you abandoned me. I was like, no, look, 16 check marks, brother. He's like, those weren't meaningful. You just shot me a text. I was like, hey man, I'm praying for you today. Like, I want meaningful communication. You don't even know what's going on with my campus. Yeah, you're right. What does meaningful, regular communication look like? Is your staff working through a book? You guys know early on in ministry, you don't have a budget. Like, you're living on borrowed time, borrowed money. I mean, we're floating checks trying to make this thing work. So if you're buying books for your staff, man, send it to the people you sent out. Are you hosting a retreat? Man, have them piggyback. We host our fall retreat in the fall, and all of our campuses that are being started kind of in Texas within driving distance always show up to that, and we cover all of it. Because we're in a spot where we should cover all of it. You don't go home to Thanksgiving, and your parents be like, hey, listen, we're going to divide this up by like 8. So I need your family to chip in. No, mom and dad say, come on, and we'll fill up your car on the way home. Like, that's the kind of parents we want to be. Send them care packages. We have our leadership team, every leadership about twice a semester. Say, hey, these are the guys, this is where they're at, and they write notes, and they pray for them, and we send them t-shirts, and we send them gift cards, care packages. Go and see them. Invite them back to speak and recruit your students. Most of our teaching that we got to do in this past semester was done by our Charlton Network folks. As they were cycling back through to do support raising and check on people. Megan, who kind of ran that, just said, hey, we're going to schedule you guys out since you're all going to be here when exposed. So much to the point that several of our graduates from our class that's fixing to be seniors, like, we're not even going to get them as interns because they're going somewhere else. Like, everybody else has already recruited them. They're super excited. It'll be okay. Group Me. Group Me is like, well, it's kind of like cilantro. You either hate it or you love it. Group Me has been really good for us to keep in contact. It has been fun to see that kind of blow up as they've all been here. And then Zoom calls. But it really doesn't matter how you do it. Just make sure you guys do it. The best way to care for them is try to care for them. Okay, so you train them, or you expose them, you cast vision, you train them, and then you take care of them. With that said, if you want, and this is going to be up here in a second, so as you walk out, you can kind of like scan that. But that's going to take you to a Google Drive that's got this slide deck, kind of the stuff I talked about, notes. It's got some resources from Paul, and you can connect that. But are there any? We've got like 7.5 minutes. Any questions, concerns, snide remarks, insults for Paul or I?
So Clayton, how much skin do you guys have in the game monetarily sending them out? Number one.
Yeah.
And number two, when you send them out in Texas, do they report to you or do they report to your Texas BSM network?
Yeah, these are great questions. And so I'll just give you some numbers. One of the things when we started sending is we realized that we need to help new ministries. And so one of the things we started doing locally is as we started casting vision of what could this look like, we've had several churches that have really bought into this idea. Because it talks about, what would it look like for what God does on Charlton's campus to change not just our campus, but campuses and regions of the world. And so we had several churches that gave. And so when we send out a team, one, we let them wreck house with whatever we've got in the building. And so buy most of the table supplies and stuff like that. But then we send them out with anywhere, depending on their context, $5,000 to $10,000. And that's money that we've had to go out and hunt down and find. When they send out in Texas within our network, it just kind of depends, because I'm not the state director. I don't have jurisdiction, because we submit to the authorities and the people that they come under. In some contexts, I have not been their official supervisor, but I work with them very closely. And so like Meg is not in San Antonio, is not in my direct kind of supervision, but Meg and I talk every week, and just a coaching, because I have a lot more influence authority than I do positional authority. And so Texas BSM has been really kind to say, Clayton, you can talk to your friends. Essentially is what happened. Mark's been really good. So, but we submit to the authorities that they're doing. We can't just do our own thing. Daniel, and then you.
Yeah. So how does it look recruiting like lay people versus people called full-time ministry and sending them in that way? So do you send like your illustration of, you feel called to be a doctor, don't do that. But how do you still send those people well? Hey, this is a strategic send city. When you go, and you don't have to be the main point person on this campus, but do you have a strategy of sending the lay people of, would you go be a doctor in this city to help them out?
Yes.
Engineer, or whatever.
So it looks kind of twofold, and we've had various success in this, and no success in this in some places. But a lot of it is, hey, you're going to hear, what does it look like for you to give back? Because our list talks about every alumni giving back $25 to the ministry. Once we started sending, that almost became non-existent, because every alumni is giving to their friends who are planting. It's like, hey, give 25 to them. Never mind, just give it to the Harmons. They need it. We'll figure it out. And so our early generation alumni don't give to us. They give to this. That's the vision. One of the visions we cast. Hey, give to your friends. Be on their support team. Your $10 is worth it. But then the second element is, hey, you're headed here. What does it look like for you to be a part of that? And we ask them to recruit from their friends. Hey, would you move up there with me, or would you move to San Antonio with me? Would you move to Fort Worth with me? And be that support group. And a lot of it is we cast that vision, but the personal invite from the person who's going, or the teams that are going, that carries way more weight than anything we could say from stage.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
So
I'll be quick. I know we got 2 minutes or 1 minute. Oh,
the person on me then.
30
Okay.
seconds. So there's 7 regional campus ministers in Kentucky. I know I'm dreaming too small, but we're charged to start a BCM. We call them BCMs. Once a year. So one new BCM, each campus minister starts one BCM a year. We've got our pipelines. What we're finding out is that, I'm finding this out, it's hard to be a campus minister, also managing other campuses that we're starting. So what's some practical ways to help manage the new campuses with still, you've still got students that are like, hey, I got a final this week. I need help.
Yeah.
So how do you navigate that? No, this is not.
No. It's like drowning and someone handing you a baby. So one of the things that I wrestled with most is having to be front lines on campus and then also translocal at the same time. And the thing that saved the Tarleton ministry was my staff. And so what I began to realize is that my associate director or my interns began the people I was training them to be the directors for two reasons. One, I wanted them to be directors, but also they were functioning as the local director because I had to take some steps back. And that was really hard because you feel like you're cheating the ministry. You don't feel like you're ever doing anything full time. Yeah. So one of the things that I would encourage, if you find yourself doing that, is find the smallest element of multiplication and really lean into that, and then multiply on the largest level. So for example, I would, I've got campuses that I'm working with. I still, for Texas BSM, I do all of our internships and stuff like that, so I'm all over the place. But on Mondays, I still meet with 3 or 4 guys for discipleship who are college students. And so I may not be controlling our small groups or the vision of this, but I still have these, I'm still on the smallest level, multiplying disciples, multiplying a small group.
That's good.
We are out of time. So can I catch you afterwards when we ask that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Hey, let me pray for us, and then there's a break, and then there's lunch at 5:30. But also check because I think there's also some dinner discussion groups you may want to be a part of. So let me pray for us. God, I just think through that picture of when Pharaoh tries to squash the Israelites, and then all of a sudden they multiplied even more. And I just think through the context and the culture that we live in, and ministry on the campus just seems like culture tries to squish us. But God, I pray that we would multiply. God, I pray that you'd bless my friends' efforts, that you would overwhelm them with your presence. God, as they cast vision, I pray that you give them favor with their students, favor with their churches, favor with their deacons, favor with their elders, favor with whoever they talk with. God, that you would do a mighty work. God, I pray for the day that there is no campus left without a gospel present. God, could that happen from the efforts in this room? We pray these things for the glory of Jesus. Amen.